Now, a couple of weeks ago, I was browsing the Steam store for good discounts. Because, let's be honest, Nintendo is not releasing anything interesting at the moment. Now, in the end, I came across a game that I heard a lot of good things about, Shadow of Mordor. So, I tried it. I mean, I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan, so why not? And as soon as I played it, I noticed something. Monolith Productions struck gold with one specific mechanic, and I bet a studio like Ubisoft is incredibly jealous of them. So, let's look into it all. Alright, this started with me downloading the game, booting it up, and going through the intro, which was pretty short. Now in this video, we won't really go into the story of this game, but I will say it is pretty good, so go experience it yourself. At this point, the only important thing to know is that you're a ranger of Gondor responsible for guarding the Black Gate of Mordor, but you and your family are killed by Sauron's armies. He is basically the big evil of the Lord of the Rings universe, who's trying to make a return in this game and its sequel. But you, the main character known as Talion, are revived with wraith-like abilities, becoming infused with an ancient elven spirit. This gives you awesome new powers, and you also can't die due to this. Each time you fall in battle, you return. Now the only way to break this curse is by defeating the one who put it on you. And so you head into Mordor to exact your revenge. So there I was, in Mordor, a decaying land filled with vile orcs, uruks, and other monsters that were expanding operations so that they and their dark master could take over the world. Now when I was dropped in this place, I didn't really know what to do. Sure, you got a little introduction to some things and a lead to follow, but in the end you can do whatever you want in this gigantic open world, which I quite like. People who have watched my videos for a while know that I love my freedom in a game. But from the beginning you are introduced to the one thing we will be talking about in this video, the Nemesis system. You get a lead for a captain, a high-ranking leader in Sauron's massive army that could lead us to the one who cursed us. But then when I confronted him, I witnessed the magic of the Nemesis system. This captain had a bit of a personality, certain strengths and weaknesses, and was in a way special. And then upon defeating him, I could see that there was a whole web of captains and war chiefs that have different power levels and ranks in Sauron's army. But this isn't static. Things can move around. As one falls, another will take its place. And if one ends up defeating me or survives a fight, he can rise. These minions of Sauron are living in a constant power struggle, with some rising to the top, while others are killed off. In many ways, it's survival of the fittest, which is logical for such barbaric creatures. And in the end, Sauron just gets the best. Now, as soon as I noticed how dynamic this system was, I fell in love with it. All of this makes the world a lot more interesting. They will even look you up, so you can also randomly be confronted by a captain who wants to defeat you to rise in the ranks, or one that you defeated in the past makes a comeback and wants a rematch. Even the way you killed them influences things. Let's say you killed a captain with a headshot. Then you will see traces of this when he makes a comeback. Now, some folks online have looked into the whole system and how it functions. As you can imagine, it is quite complex. There are a number of things that influence the captains and war chiefs you encounter, and the game can make literally thousands of them using different factors. You have the following. Names. Each one has a unique name that also fits with their abilities or character in a way. Now sure, you can sometimes come across the same one, but this is relatively rare because there are so many. Titles and names you have, for example, are Kingslayer or The Shadow. Visuals. These guys are generated randomly using all kinds of body types and parts, hairstyles, behaviors, voices, animations, and more that the game can pick and mix with. The only thing it keeps in mind is the personality of the Nemesis. It needs to fit with them after all. Power levels. This determines the strength. The higher the number, the better, and the maximum level is 20. Rank. The longer the Nemesis stays in the Nemesis system, the more he is able to climb by defeating others, defeating the player, or surviving certain events. You have just plain Captain, Veteran, Elite, Legendary, and obviously you also have the difference between Captains and War Chiefs. Relationships. This is an interesting one. Some of the Uruks or orcs may have some kinds of relations to other Nemesis, usually a rivalry between the two. And so you will constantly see these fighting or annoying each other. And almost always this ends with one of them defeating the other, and so the victorious one will rise in rank. Fighting styles. Each one has their own particular fighting style based on various different ones the game can choose from. Think of an archer wielding a crossbow, a heavily armored warrior with a shield, or some sort of an assassin. And they tend to surround themselves with Uruks and orcs of the same type as themselves. For example, a berserker captain will have a small group of berserkers with him. Traits. Each one has various strengths and weaknesses, which makes them unique, and in the game you can learn about this by finding information or extracting it from someone. This way you can adjust your approach for the best outcome possible, and it also makes going into battle without any knowledge much more difficult, because they might be immune to arrows or ranged attacks, which I encountered in my playthrough as well. Location. These captains can be found all over the game, and by learning new info you can find them, and sometimes you even have to draw them out. Branding. Instead of killing off a captain or war chief, you can also make them yours. That way you can command them to take on others, and they will fight for you. Now these are all the things that can influence the system, how you plan things, and the outcomes. But what does that look like? Well, let's look at some encounters I had in my playthrough. As you can imagine, I started going all around Mordor because I really liked hunting down these captains and watching them interact with each other. For example, I was tracking down Blorg raid leader after obtaining some information on him. And due to this, I knew he was going to duel another captain who challenged him. So I invaded the duel. But first I decided to watch from a distance to see who would actually win this fight. He was taking on Golm the Skinless, but I could see from the power levels that this would not be a fair fight. And I was right. In no time, Golm was killed, and that's where I came in. I knew from interrogating other orcs and Uruks that Blorg was especially weak to a fully charged bow shot to the head. So I was able to take him out with one clean shot. Not the most exciting hunt, but it was fun to see them duke it out. And if I didn't know that a headshot would be so effective, I bet it would have been a lot harder. However, this gave me an idea. Why not create a powerful captain that I could take on as soon as he is at the top? And for the job, I chose this fine fellow, Hura the Angry, the crossbow-wielding orc with ape-like features. I found him when I was tracking down another crossbow wielder named Krik the Stinger. Overall, not the most exciting fight, but as you can see, Hura won, increasing his power level. Next, he tried to complete a trial. He had to kill this wild beast to prove his worth and show off his strength. And for a bit, I thought he would fail. But then, right before he was pushed into this geyser, he hit the animal with his crossbow, killing it, which again increased his power. And I knew that soon enough, he would have to challenge another captain to truly rise in rank. But first, he had a feast, where he celebrated a bit, and this again increased his power level. However, after that came a big moment for Hura. He had to defeat Rug, Headhunter, in a duel to increase his rank. And this didn't end well. The shield that Rug used was too much for Hura. He could block any arrows, and the shield bashes were devastating. In the end, Hura couldn't deal with this, and so he died. This was a bit disappointing, because I wanted to see him rise after all, so that I could take him out as he reached the top of Sauron's army. But as you can see, the road to the top is dangerous, and most don't make it. But I wanted revenge, so I killed Rug. Now the next Nemesis story I want to share with all of you was quite exciting, because it was tough. It was early on in the game. I wasn't that powerful and lacked a lot of good abilities that you get later on in the game. I took on a mission to take on a level 8 captain known as Tugok the Guardian. This giant clad in heavy armor, wielding a flaming spear and a massive shield. And he wasn't alone. He was surrounded by followers. And I will say my approach here was horrible. I saw an explosive close to them and thought, maybe it can take his followers out that way. But it barely did anything. And because I had no info on this captain, I didn't know he was immune to arrows. So this headshot was also pointless. So I was in for a real struggle. Now, after almost dying, I was able to defeat all the other orcs and uruks. And no matter what I did, I couldn't really get past Tugog's defenses. His shield couldn't be broken, I couldn't jump over him, and I wasn't able to get behind him. However, I had one last trick up my sleeve: stealth attacks. One of the most powerful moves in the entire game. And this worked very well. It was clearly a big weakness of him, since his defense is just too good. Overall, this was a great fight. It forced me to get creative. I mean, I tried a lot of different things to beat him, but in the end, I did win. Now, the last story I want to share with all of you was later on in the game, when I was experimenting a lot with the branding mechanic. I had to build up an army by taking control of all the war chiefs, but this can be tricky because they are often surrounded by their main captains who act as bodyguards. So I came up with a plan to make it easier. I branded one of his main guys, Drag the Rat, who I commanded to betray the war chief. And so he and another captain that I controlled attacked their leader. So I jumped in to help. As you can imagine, chaos ensued, but I was able to defeat the war chief and brand him in the end, even though I lost one of my captains. In general, this one was a lot of fun, and I'm glad I prepared. But I will say, this system also has its pros and cons. Gathering information on captains, learning their weaknesses, hunting them down, setting them up against each other and seeing them fight amongst themselves to rise higher is fun and interesting. It truly is one of the best mechanics I have ever seen, and it makes the world a whole lot more intriguing because it's constantly moving and changing. And the devs added enough different weaknesses, abilities, designs, and names so it doesn't get boring or repetitive. When I was playing through it, I thought to myself, I bet the developers of Assassin's Creed are super jealous. The idea of the Nemesis system would be awesome for a game like that. It would make hunting down and assassinating targets a lot better. But it also has issues. For example, this game is just too easy, especially when you gain more abilities and other gear down the road. For me, the difficulty fell off a cliff as soon as I got some good runes on my weapons that healed me, and when I unlocked some powerful attacks like this stun and swift strikes that I can perform when I jump over someone. Even high-level captains and war chiefs that are supposedly super strong were quite easy most of the time. I rarely died, and this ruined it all a bit for me. I mean, dying in the game also sets things in motion in this Nemesis system, so if you don't die that much, the system is not as dynamic. In general, some of the fights were boring, trivial, and just a chore at some point, which only became worse when I started using branding. This made it all even easier. However, in a way, it did become more fun. Gaining and manipulating these followers is a great mechanic. Now, this isn't the only issue. A lot of encounters in this game also become extremely chaotic very fast. And this is also due to my playstyle, because sometimes I just rush in. But even when I'm very cautious, I just notice that things spiral out of control very fast, which can be frustrating to say the least. In many ways, it feels like there are two outcomes: an easy and calm fight, or loads of enemies swarming everywhere making your life hell. So are there ways to improve all of this? Well, I got some ideas. Now, a sequel to this game was made called Shadow of War, and it improved a number of things like branding. For example, allies can save you or even betray you, and some new things were added like being able to conquer Mordor itself with strongholds. However, I haven't played that one yet, so I will mostly ignore it and focus on what's seen in Shadow of Mordor. Now, I think the Nemesis system is awesome and it works well. You can gather info multiple ways, each captain or war chief feels unique, and you have multiple ways to approach a situation. For example, by poisoning their drinks, blowing up explosives or campfires, branding captains so they will challenge or betray others, and releasing bees. So expanding on that would be a no-brainer. But I think the most important thing is increasing difficulty, and this can be done by increasing enemy health and damage. But this wouldn't be perfect. It helps a bit, but it's also a lazy solution. I think it's better to add ways for enemies to deal with your special attacks, a bit like the shield guy did by pushing me off when I tried to jump over him, which is to an extent already in the game, but they could improve on this. This way you will have more interesting interesting battles where you need to try multiple tactics or angles to defeat someone. So give them counters. For example, when I try to jump over him and it fails, he immediately attacks. Aside from that, it would also be great to get rid of some of the weaknesses like headshots. Sometimes this makes it too easy, with that one-on-one duel being a great example. Sure, headshots could deal extra damage, but stronger enemies shouldn't die to them in one hit. This way, enemies become stronger and beating them becomes a more interesting challenge. But of course, you, the player, also need to become a bit weaker. There are two ways to do this. First, get rid of the slow-mo effect that happens when you draw your bow, because it makes headshots way too easy. Or limited at least. Secondly, the game should lower the amount of button click prompts, or get rid of them completely. This way you have to be more aware of the enemies around you and which ones are about to strike. All of this would increase the difficulty, but it wouldn't turn the game into Dark Souls or something. And you could also include these changes in a higher difficulty setting, which would be the perfect solution in my opinion. Now the other big thing I would change about the game is I would turn down the chaos factor. For example, by limiting the maximum amount of enemies that spawn or show up. This way you can still be overwhelmed, making stealth a valuable approach, but this won't become crazy. I bet this is already in the game to an extent, but I would lower it further. So yeah, those are the only things I would really change, aside from potentially adding new things to the game. But that is what the sequel mostly did. Now I hope to see concepts like this in more games, because man, it's great. However, this might be tough with Warner Brothers or Monolith, I can't remember who it was, putting a patent on the Nemesis system, which limits basically any other studio of creating something similar. But maybe one day in the future it will expire or someone finds a way around this. Who knows? Now I hope you liked this video. Be sure to subscribe, leave a like, do all that good stuff, it really helps. And let me know in the comments what you think about this game and the Nemesis system. And what else I should cover. I don't know, I'm just having fun at the moment and making whatever I feel like in terms of videos. So I hope you enjoyed it, bye!